Alright, we should finish up with this video right here. So this kind of looks like the same thing that we dealt before, but we're not talking about the angles and the arcs this time. We're just talking about the lengths of the line segments. Alright, so we had a thing that said, remember if we call this A and B, we would say AB equals, we call this CD equals CD. Alright, so that the segments of these chords, the product of the segments of the chords are equal to each other. It's a little wordy, but that's what it means. It means this times this, 2x times 2x, let's write it down, 2x times 2x equals the product of the segments of these chords right here, 5 times 20. So let's do that. That's going to be 4x squared equals 100. Divide both sides by 4. X squared equals 25. Take the square root. Now technically it's plus or minus 5, but we're not going to use the negative 5 because if I put a negative 5 in here that would make it negative 10. We can't have the length of a segment, length of anything, being negative 10. So we don't use the negative part, we just choose the positive part. So x equals 5. You don't have to find the actual lengths, you just have to solve for x in this particular problem. That's all there is to. Multiply these two segments, set them equal to each other, solve for x. Okay, on this one we're also talking about the line segments. A little different though. They don't intersect inside the circle, they intersect outside the circle. So if you remember, now I didn't put one on the test on this particular test, but there is one where you have two secants and you got to find the length. So what you do is you take the whole thing, remember this? Take the whole length of the secant and multiply by its outside part. You would do the same thing here if that was a secant. In this particular case it's not, it's a tangent. But you would take the whole thing times the outside part equal the whole thing times its outside part, and then you do your math and you solve for x. On this one, you don't really have to do both of those steps because the tangent really doesn't have a whole thing and an outside. The whole thing is the outside. Does that make any sense? We talked about that earlier. Well, a lot earlier. It's been several weeks now. But anyway, let's take a look at this. What's the whole thing right here? A lot of people would say it's 8x. It's not 8x. The whole entire length from here to here is the sum of those two things, which is x plus 8. So it's going to be x plus 8. That's the whole thing times the outside part, the part that's on the outside, which is from here to here, which is 8. So I'm going to put an 8 right here. Excuse me, somebody's calling me. Okay, sorry about that. Let's see, what did we say? That the whole thing times the outside, so the whole thing is x plus 8 times the outside, which is 8, equals, oops, that was ugly, equals, now look at this. It's kind of the same thing, like the whole thing times the outside, but look, the outside is the whole thing, so we multiply it by itself. So it's 9, which is the outside, times the whole thing, which is 9 again, so it's 9 times 9, or 9 squared. So it's this squared, it's this tangent squared, equals the whole thing times the outside. Alright, now we just do some math on this. So it's just 8x plus 64 equals 81. And let's see, I don't want to write that. 8x equals, subtract 64 from both sides, and that's 17. If I subtract a 64, divide both sides by 8, and you get 17 over 8, and that's x. You don't have to change that to a decimal, just keep it like that. I'd be perfectly fine with that. Alright, let's move on. Oh, by the way, what number was that? That was number 18. That was 18. Alright, we're still dealing with circles, but it's a little different now. No pictures. We're just talking about the equation of the circle. This is the equation of a circle. If you remember, it's x minus h, that quantity is squared, plus y minus k, that thing is squared, equals r squared. The h and the k represent the center of the circle. The r represents the radius of the circle. So if you saw it written like this, some people would say, oh, the radius, or the center, sorry, is 2, 7, or something like that. They just see the 2 and the 7, but you got to take in consideration the signs. Remember, this is x minus whatever the h is. So I don't see a minus here, do I? It's the same thing, though. Plus is the same thing as minus and negative. X minus negative 2. So what are you subtracting from x? You're subtracting a negative 2. So the center of the circle is negative 2. What about here? This fits perfectly with our little formula. It's y minus k. There's the y, there's the minus. So what is the k? It's just plain old 7. It's not negative 7, it's just plain old 7. That right there is the center of the circle. Now let's talk about the radius. Now, this is the r squared. Okay, so 81 is r squared. We don't want r squared, we want what r is equal to. So we say r squared equals 81. So if you take the square root, what's r equal to? R is equal to 9. Now again, technically it's plus or minus 9, but we're not going to talk about the minus because that's the radius of a circle. You're not going to have a negative radius of a circle. So you would just say r equals, or you can write the word radius, r, I would understand, is 9. And that is your answer. All you got to do is basically look. There's not a whole lot of math involved. Yeah, maybe taking the square root of that, but that wasn't that really much of a big deal, was it? Alright, so now in the next problem, we're going to go the other way. We're going to give you the center and the radius, and you've got to figure out what this formula is. Alright, here's the last problem of this chapter. Write the equation of the circle if they give you the center and they give you the radius. Now, I wrote it earlier, but I'm going to write it again. It's a good idea, if you don't remember it, to write it several times. It's supposed to be a plus. Y minus k squared equals r squared. Look what we're going to do. What's the center? It's negative 3, negative 5. So I put the negative 3 right here, and I put the negative 5 right here. So it's going to be x minus negative 3. What's x minus a negative? Well, it's plus 3 squared. That's supposed to be a squared. Plus y minus a negative 5. That's the same thing as y plus 5. And that's squared, equals r squared. Well, the radius is 7, so you square that, and you get 49. And lo and behold, there's your equation of the circle. That tells you everything you need to know about the circle. It tells you the center, tells you the radius. And if you wanted to graph it, you could. I'm not going to make you graph it on here, but they could very easily ask for that kind of thing. I won't put that on the final, so don't worry. Alright, well, that's it for Chapter 10, and hope you enjoyed that. Hope it helped, and good luck with that part of the test.